Hey, hockey fans, welcome to the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast. I'm Gino Retta. I've spent over 4 decades working in the game of hockey, fortunate enough to meet some of the great characters of the game. Saw them come into the league, watched them shine in the game, and now they've moved on to life after hockey. And the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast gives us a chance to catch up, tell some great stories, relive some great memories, and hear what they're up to today. Today, we're joined by a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Still holds the NHL record for most penalty minutes in a single season. One of the most feared fighters in the NHL back in the 70s and maybe all time. A key member of the Broad Street Bullies during the Philadelphia Flyers back-to-back Stanley Cup championships in 1974 and 75. He's Dave the Hammer Schultz. Dave, welcome to the show. It is great to chat with you. You and I have never had a chance to talk before. Welcome.
Well, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just as we were firing it up, you were telling a funny story about, I was teasing you about the technology of this. Why don't you tell our audience what you were saying?
Well, until I was 9 years old, when we moved back to Waldheim, Saskatchewan, where I was born, I lived on a farm. No running water, no electricity, and no nothing. Okay, no indoor plumbing. So it was. I often think that's why when people say, "Come on, I'm supposed to know this stuff." I mean, there wasn't even electricity when I was a kid. So, but I'm learning it.
You are, and most of the guests that I have on this show, we've had Marty Brodeur on the show, and we've had like Pat LaFontaine and Mike Modano, Eric Lindros. We've had a lot of guys on the show who I was a broadcaster and watching them play, and actually was involved in their NHL entry drafts and stuff. But you're one of the guys that as a kid, I got to watch. And I've had, a number of guys of your era, Serge Savards and guys who I really had a chance to watch you come into the league. So this is really good for me to have a chance to talk to you because as a hockey fan, I watched you play and I watched you do some incredible things. Just to remind our audience, you came into the NHL shortly after expansion. So we saw the NHL go from the original 6 to completely exploded to double the size. All of a sudden, it was an opportunity for a lot more players to get involved. But then the whole mentality of the approach, because before your era of coming to the league, if you had 5 or 6 of the best players, best skilled players of the game, you're going to win the cup. That's why the Habs kept winning. That's why the Leafs kept winning. That's why these teams. But in your era, it was much more about building a team. Explain to our audience what that was like for you as a young hockey player coming into a league where all of a sudden it's like, you know what? Now I feel like I can be a part of this because there's more opportunity for more players with different skill sets. What was that like for you?
Well, again, the expansion from 6 to 12 gave a lot more guys an opportunity. I was drafted by the Flyers in 1969. So I'd played 3 years of junior, Swift Current, and then for last year in Sorel, Quebec. Anyway, but I spent 3 years in the minor leagues. My whole life changed. I mean, I never had a fight on the ice in junior hockey. In fact, the last year I scored 50 goals in about 80 games, including playoffs. As I was playing with Sorel, Quebec, the Sorel Blackhawks, and we went to the finals against the Junior Canadians. Anyway, so I go to Flyers training camp, and Keith Allen, the general manager, felt I needed a little bit more or whatever, and so he sent me to Salem, Roanoke, Virginia, in the Eastern Hockey League, and that's where I played my first year, and I scored 32 goals, but I also got 300 and almost 400 minutes in penalties. And that's when I started fighting. It was crazy. And it kind of just continued on for the next 11 years. So,
but it's interesting because, sorry, go ahead.
No, again, it was just, an opportunity for a lot of guys to play in the National Hockey League. And the Flyers needed, they were an expansion team. So they needed, it was going to take a while for the Flyers to build a team. And of course, in the same year I was drafted, Bobby Clark was, and that was a key to the Flyers' future. And me and Don Selesky and a few other guys got drafted the same year. And so it was going to take a while. And when Mr. Snyder saw some of the some of the things that were going on in how they beat up the Flyers. He said, we might not be able to score all, goals like some of these other teams, but we can certainly beat up other guys if that's what was necessary. Because he did not want to see that type of intimidation. And again, it was the St. Louis Blues that really did it. Noel Picard or somebody anyway. Anyway, I finally made the Flyers in 72, 73.
And things worked real well. You had your rookie season. you earned your stripes. You earned your ice time. You earned an opportunity to play on the team.
Yep.
And then just your second year in the league, you guys are ripping it up. And you end up winning the Stanley Cup in just year 2, and then you win again in year 3. At that point, it was real easy. The NHL was easy, wasn't
it? Yeah, right.
Feel like that?
Anyway, I mean, just so you know, I mean, I hated fighting. That's not something I wanted to do. I thought I was a pretty good hockey player with the Swift Current Broncos, and then Sorel. But I got in a fight my first game in the Eastern Hockey League. I got in a fight my second game, and it just continued. I mean, there was always guys trying to intimidate your teammates, and I would stand up to those guys, and they continued. So we developed a great hockey team. We had an unbelievable team with Clarkey, Billy Barber, Bill Flett the first years, and then Reggie Leach, Ed Van Imp and Joe Watson and Jimmy Watson. We had just had a great team. Rick McLeish was our first 50 goal scorer, great player, one of the best skaters to play in the game. So we won a lot of games and with the 2 championships. Then we lost in the finals in this third season in 75, 76. And we didn't have Rick McLeish playing with us, and we didn't have Bernie Perrant in the nets. So, they beat us. They beat us anyway. And a lot of people in the hockey world were happy.
What was it? Yeah, because hated you because you guys have been known. I mean, people have heard the term the Broad Street Bullies thrown out there, and you were a huge part of that. Obviously, you were playing in the city of Philadelphia, which just loved this kind of work attitude, the blue collar, go out there and muck it up and work. What was it like for you to be playing in that city with the label, the Broad Street Bullies, and you, Dave the Hammer Schultz? I mean, did you ever have to buy a drink anywhere or ever have to buy a meal anywhere, or were you look to the local hero all the time?
Well, yeah, we the fans were great for us. I mean, they fell in love with us. I mean, 2.1 million people showed up for the parade in 74, and which is now 50 years this season. So we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the first Stanley Cup this year, and so yeah, the fans took to us. I mean, we were playing exciting hockey. We were playing good hockey. We were winning because we had great talent, and we had a great goaltender in Bernie Perrant. So yeah, they fell in love with us, and it's been a wonderful ride actually ever since. And it's now 50 years since we won that first cup.
I should point out that you didn't just drop the gloves during that era. In the first season you won the cup, you scored 20 goals and you had 36 points. You'd be worth like $15 million a year if you could score 20 and lead the league in fighting, no?
Beats 50,000.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It was tough. You also went through, sadly, the difficulty of a rough time where the PA was run by somebody who maybe should not have been running. Alan
No
Eagleson.
Kidding.
Yeah. Tell. Go ahead, jump in there.
Well, I mean, I can say his name. What's he going to do? In fact, I'd like to see him. I'd like to toss him around a little bit. Alan Eagleson. Again, yeah, he was indicted on 80 counts. I don't know. But but again, understanding, it was expansion. The same time the WHA came in in 72, 73. And so it helped increase what we were making. Our contracts still wasn't much, as compared to today. But, we just, we didn't play for money. We played for the love of the game. And we played to win. I mean, Bob Clark is as great a leader as there's ever been in sports, any sport. I mean, he's got a lot of company, but on the other hand, he was the best. And Fred Shearer was a great coach. Um, there's been a lot of things said about Freddie. Anyway, if it wasn't for Fred, he liked a tough team. And of course, he makes comments, well, my players like to fight, so I let them. That's what he said. Anyway, well, maybe that's true. But I didn't like to fight, but I did. I did it. And, then unfortunately for me, I got traded, in 70, beginning of 76.
Speaking of 1976, you guys are the defending Stanley Cup champs. It's one of the craziest moments in hockey history that I remember. You're playing the Soviet Red Army, which
Yes.
was, I mean, it was the ultimate good versus evil back then in the 70s. For our younger audience, this wasn't when they were Russia. This was the Soviet Union, and nobody really understood. We had seen in the 72 Summit Series a little bit of a hint of what they were capable of doing. And then
Yeah.
we understood their Red Army was supposed to be this big machine that was supposed to terrify people. And they come and play the defending cup champion, the Philadelphia Flyers. For our audience who maybe doesn't recall, remind our audience what happened in that game with you guys.
Well, it was the Red Army team. There was two teams. It was the Soviet Wings. They played four other teams, but this Red Army played four teams in the National Hockey League and beat the first two and tied Montreal 3-3. And then they had to come see the Flyers. So there was a lot of hype to the game, and we a lot of people wanted us to prior to that did not want us, didn't like us because of our kind of rough style and winning ways, but we we a lot of people were pulling for us in that game, even Canadians. And Anyway, at about the 17-minute mark of the first period, Ed Van Impe came across the ice and just nailed Karmelov, their star, and he went down. And I guess we were hitting too much. We were playing too rough. And so they called the players off the ice, the team. The Soviets went into the dressing room, and of course, Mr. Snyder came down there and said, if they don't come back out, they're not getting paid. And they came back out, and we went on to we beat them 4-1, outshot them 40-13. Again, were they a little intimidated? I don't know. They had a great team, but their style, they like to circle in the between the blue lines. And our coach Fred Sherowitz studied the Russian way of play, and he said, just stand on the blue line, and when they come there, hit them, and we did. And so we dominated that game.
It's one of the craziest calls in NHL history. Obviously, you were in the game. Did you ever go back and look at the video of it? Because the favorite call was when we realized what was going on, that they were leaving the ice. They're going home. They came here. They can't handle it. And they're going home. The Russians are going. The Soviets are going home. Did you ever go back and look at that video?
No, I have not. But there's a guy in this area making a documentary on that game. So I don't know. It won't be out for another year or so, but look forward to seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of the great calls of all time. Now, I should point out that the NHL, we've had a number of rule changes in the NHL, and you have a rule named after you, the Schultz Rule, when they banned taping of hands under their gloves. Tell our audience about that.
I put tape on my hand, on my right hand only, before I went out for the game. I didn't put it on there in warm up, and it was just to protect my hand, in case I hit a guy on the head. And so we're playing in Montreal, in game of the week, whatever, and Van Boxmeer, they brought him up from Nova Scotia, I guess, and he stuck a stick between my legs, and I just brought my glove and just nailed him, and he went down, and that's where the Schultz Rule came in. You can't have a foreign substance on your hand, and if you hurt someone, you get a game misconduct. So yeah,
How
the rules have come a long way since then.
Yeah, it's changed dramatically. What was it like for you? Because I mean, you played for the Flyers, the Kings, the Pens, the Sabres. At some point, you're going to face former teammates whose expectations on their side is the same thing, and you had a job to do. How hard was that to drop the gloves and go after a teammate?
The worst was my first game back in Philadelphia with the Los Angeles Kings. We were playing the Flyers here in Philly, and Paul Holmgren, who really in essence probably was the guy that replaced me. He was a big, strong, good hockey player, and of course he'd been in the game forever since then. But yeah, Paul, I get in a fight with Paul Holmgren. He actually had uh, a shield on his helmet. I think he had a slight eye injury or something. And anyway, it was the worst. I'll never. That was not fun facing. Again, I wasn't that I played against him or with him, I should say, but it was always I hated playing the Flyers.
Yeah. It's difficult because it's like our audience says they're listening to you. And I mean, I got to see you play during an era where that was the expectation and you had to do it to win. And it worked. You ended up winning 2 Stanley Cups because of it. If you guys weren't the tough physical team that you were, you wouldn't have won those cups. Let's be honest. But there's also a side of you that keeps coming up now in this conversation. And I've seen in the past, you were not, it's not like you said, I want to go out there and fight. And this is really important. You wrote an article for the New York Times, um, I think probably 6 or 7 years after you set the NHL record for most penalty minutes. And I think it was kind of subtitled "A Letter to Your 6-Year-Old Son, Chad."
Yeah.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about that and why that was important to you, and what you said in that letter?
Well, I'm not sure he totally understood, but and just on that note, I am writing a book that will be out in the fall of 2025,
Okay.
and where I'm going to way better explain what all my thoughts that were going through my mind, why I fought, how I, all those kind of things, and but so it was just to state to Chad that it's part of the game. I forget exactly how I still have that letter actually.
Can I read a portion of it and you can react to it? Do you mind if I read a portion of it?
Sure.
These are your words. While you were going through that and you had a 6-year-old son, Chad, and you wrote, and I quote, "I wanted desperately to be a good, clean player, just as I had been in junior, but it wasn't to be. I was branded a goon and there was no turning back. After my 20-goal year with the Flyers, I prayed that Freddie Shero would acknowledge my value as a scorer and allow me to forsake the fighting, but he wouldn't have any part of it. The Flyers were winning with an accent on bullyism, so why should they tamper with success?" As you hear those words, as you remember back on those words, reflect on that for me.
Well, let me first state the reason that fighting has been in hockey, and again, still the odd time, it was for players to protect themselves.
Right.
If someone ran one of my players and tried to take his head off, I was going to go and fight him. So it a lot of players didn't play as dirty or like to, when you're intimidated, and any player can be intimidated, you don't play as well. And so when teams try to intimidate players, try to intimidate our best players, someone had to, and throughout hockey, that's the way it was. And so trying to explain that is not easy, because people just think all I wanted to do was fight. I didn't want to ever fight. I never ever said to a guy, "You want to go?" I wasn't going to tell him I didn't want to go anyway, but I wasn't going to tell him that. And now he's ready for me, waiting for me. Anyway, so it was it's a they still have you can still fight the National Hockey League and hit. It's not as prevalent, and again, a lot of the reasons that the rules was to prevent injuries.
Yeah.
I never
I thought it was
anybody.
interesting. You made an important distinction between saying, you talk about the difference between fighting and being violent. It for
Very
many it seems like it's the same thing, but in your mind it's different, isn't it?
well. People would say, uh, he's violence in hockey. Then they'd show a picture of me fighting. I mean, I'm serious. I never used my stick. I didn't want anybody to use it on me. Okay, I had in all of my 8 years in the National Hockey League, I had 8 stitches, and that's when I fell against the boards. I've never had I've never had an operation on anything. Anyway, maybe I should have got it on my brain, but uh, so violence is when you're using your stick or punching a guy or taking advantage of a guy, running a guy into the boards, and they've got rid of all of that, most of it. You get suspended. I never got. You know what I got suspended for one time? Automatic suspension playing in Boston, and Terry O'Reilly, who I fought 9 times, grabbed my hands down by my wrists. Well, how was I supposed to hit him? So I headbutted him, and I got suspended for 3 games. Anyway, but yeah, I mean the way the game was played was they had guys who would protect your better players.
Yeah. I would imagine though for you, because you've got this I did what I had to do. I didn't like doing it. I was asked to do things that I didn't enjoy doing, yet it was successful, so I had to keep doing it. To me, it sounds like you're being pulled. I wonder what that would have been like for you emotionally as you're going through that. I think you mentioned in the book that you wrote, I want to say back in the early 80s,
Yeah.
where you talked about how hard it was to sleep at night when you knew what was coming the
Oh yeah.
next day.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that because became it was expected of me. If some guy ran one of our guys, particularly this is on home ice, and the fans were going, okay, when's Schultz going to go after him? And there was other guys too, Bob Kelly and DuPont, and a lot of our guys could fight if they had to. But
Yeah.
so that's what it just became expected, and I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to ever. My biggest fear was getting a real punch to the face, and it would really affect me. That never happened. I certainly didn't win a lot of the different fisticuffs that I got involved with, but um, I had to be game. I had to be ready, and that was the toughest part. And I even scored some goals in between.
Had, had had Chris, you did score. You scored a lot of goals, quite frankly, for a guy who was expected to do everything you could. Um, I had Chris Nyland on the show a couple of weeks ago,
Oh yeah.
and he shared a lot of similar stories, and he said that the way he ended up having to deal with it was by taking painkillers, and then it became an addiction to painkillers, and um, the guys that go through stuff that you have some battles with addiction, and you've had your own personal battles to the extent that
Yeah.
you're willing to share. Can you tell us what you went through and how you're
Well,
doing?
once I retired, okay, it became very difficult for me, and I not that I never drank any beer, but I started drinking, and I drank way too much, and finally, I was never into the drug scene or anything like that, but I did drink a lot, and actually, almost 14 months ago, I haven't had a drink since. Uh,
Wow.
and yeah, it's been again. I should have did this 20 years ago, but I did it at age 73. Uh, so it's been wonderful since then, and never being hung over and all those kind of things, so finally, I'm gonna when I die, I'll be in sobriety.
I am so happy to hear that because I didn't know and I didn't know how to broach the topic, but I thought I had
Oh,
to do that.
yeah.
That gives me such great joy to hear that you're on the good end of this. What was the turning point for you? You say it was you mentioned you had to wait till you're in your 70s till you made that decision, and now you've been 14 months clean and sober, which is amazing. What was it that got you to make that decision, and what's keeping you there?
Um, I don't know. Actually, the National Hockey League really watches a lot of guys, and they have people involved with our association, Players Association, um, that that they'll get the help, and you can talk with. And I did that, um, and then remember, if you recall, Todd Fedoric.
Yeah, yeah, very
He's
well.
now doing radio for the Flyers now, color, and he had his own bouts with sobriety, and of course he's way younger than me, and we talked a number of times at different events. Anyway, he's the one that said, he called me up one day, says, "You ready?" I said, "Yep." I said, "Where are we going?" He says, and he took me up into Pennsylvania for rehab for 28 days. Um, so it was. I thank Todd all the time. He was a great guy, and again, he knows, he knew what I was going through. So that's how it happened, and I'm so glad. Again, one of the things I guess that really made it worse was COVID. I mean, I never got COVID. I've never had COVID, but I would sit. I live on the water down by the Jersey Shore, and I would sit and look outside, and the government was saying, "Don't move, just sit there." Well, I listened to them too much. Again, I still went out to eat and stuff like that, but um, that's it. I started to drink a little bit more, and I was only drinking wine the last 12 years. Anyway, the bottom line is, yeah, I'm a happy camper.
That's amazing. Can I ask you to do something? And if you feel comfortable with this, do it. If you don't, that's fine too. When Chris Nyland shared this story, he kind of sent a message to other players out there, and maybe even just people who never played the game, who may be experiencing similar struggles. If you had an opportunity to speak to somebody who may be going through right now what you were going through 15 months and previous to that, what would you say to them right now?
Go to AA. They got the greatest program in the world. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for, in fact, I said after I came out of rehab, the toughest part is not going to be here in rehab, but when I get out. And I went to meetings 4, 5, 6 times a week, and I don't go as often anymore. But their program uh, got me through, and again, it's amazing what the stories you hear from these guys who have been in sobriety for a number of years. Uh, how grateful they are that this program, and my sons are I'd still be married if it wasn't for my drinking. I've been divorced for a long time, and I have 2 sons, and they have kids. Um, anyway, my oldest son had his daughter die at age 9 uh, from a brain tumor 4 years ago. So that was a tough part. But anyway, yeah, I'm a happy camper, and if you want what I have, go to AA,
Well said.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
You mentioned, and I want to get back to this because I think it's very important. You mentioned that you are now writing another book. You wrote one in the early
Well,
80s. Maybe
yeah,
people may have misunderstood. I think it created some conflict between yourself and Bobby Clark. And
he didn't
but
care.
why was it important to write another book, and how is this going to be different, or what kind of things are going to be in there that we need to know about?
Well, it's going to be entirely different. Okay, I'm going to write I mean, Stan Fischler, with no disrespect to him, he wrote the book in 1981, I guess, and it wasn't my thoughts, or I wouldn't have said things those ways, and it was a very small part. Again, this is now 50 years later, or 40 years, 45, whatever. Um, so
And you're a
I've been in
different
life.
person now.
What's that?
And you're a different
Yes.
person now.
Yeah, and but I want to explain to the best of my ability. I have a great writer, Dan Robson, who is out of Toronto. He's written a number of sports books, and one is Millard Clint Malarchuk, who,
Clint Malarchuk, yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to explain what happened to me.
Yeah.
I mean, people back home, they'd go like, "What's wrong with this guy? What happened to him?" And I, I was born in Waldheim. I grew up for a few years there. I mean, it was a very, very religious town. There's 5 churches and no bars in Waldheim. It's about 30 miles north of Saskatoon. So I want to explain all that stuff, and so people can understand. The book is called "Hammered by Life." And in many ways, I've been hammered. That's my, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me, but hopefully I can, if somebody will read that book and get something from it, just like me talking here today, if that can help someone, awesome. That's what it's all about.
Good for you. We look forward to doing that. And when it comes out, we'll certainly talk about it here.
Yes.
Podcast. Well, we certainly will. Before you take off,
yep.
I want to ask you 5 fast facts. Again, it gives us little insights about what's going on. So I'll ask you 5 quick questions. You give me 5 brief answers. Okay? You ready to go? All right. Time now for 5 fast facts with Dave the Hammer Schultz. Who's the best teammate that you ever played with?
Oh boy. I'll just say Rick McLeish.
The best coach you ever played for?
Best what?
Best coach you ever played for?
Oh, Fred Shero by far.
Who did you hate playing against the most and why?
The Boston Bruins, and I fought Terry O'Reilly 9 times. I wanted to fight some of his other guys, smaller guys, and he'd jump right in the middle.
I get that. What was your
great guy,
NHL
though. I
city?
met him.
Yeah. What was your favorite NHL city to play in?
Oh, well, I will tell you, I'll say Montreal, although I never played very much. In fact, when Fred Shero when Cornway came on the ice, Fred Shero would say, "Come off," because I couldn't keep up to him. But the form was the form, Montreal form. I was a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, and my brother Ray was a Montreal Canadian fan. But awesome. Montreal.
If you hadn't become an NHL player, what do you think plan B was for a career for you?
Well, I would hope I would have gone to college. I was very good in math, so I'd have been maybe an engineer or something like that.
Awesome. Dave, listen, I've got to tell you, the turning point for me in this entire interview was great to hear your insights, and I dealt with it with trepidation because I didn't know where it was going to go. But to hear that you've been now 14 months sober, is amazing. I am so happy for you. It looks like you can't wipe the smile off your face.
Yeah.
I am so glad that things are going so well for you. And I look forward to reading your book and getting a lot of insights into stuff that now you can reflect back in the way you do. Thank you so much.
I thank the National Hockey League PA or alumni for helping me through my journey.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks.
2-time Stanley Cup champion and now sober, which is the best news of all, Dave the Hammer Schultz. The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by 7-Eleven and Athlete's Care. Before leaving the rink, order your favorite Slurpee, fresh 100% premium Arabica coffee, hot from the oven, pizza and wings, pint of ice cream, or even a carton of milk, and a dozen eggs, loaf of bread from the 7 Now app, and Team 7-Eleven will have your order ready for pickup 24/7. Athlete's Care is proud to be celebrating its 25th year offering sports medicine services to both elite athletes and the general population who require rehab for a new or chronic injury or pain. Go to where the best go. Athlete's Care Sports Medicine Clinics with 24 locations in the Greater Toronto Area and Ottawa. If you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca where you can both listen and subscribe to future shows. 7-Eleven's Overtime Podcasts can be found on Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. As well, please check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel at O Time Podcast. Until next week, I'm Gino Reda saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast.